Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Eerie News, and today is July 11th, 2023, Tuesday, July 11th, 2023. And let's get on to some Eerie News. And this one, let me tell you something. I was a little bit surprised with this one because I had never heard of this. And basically, this is out of Daily Mail, and it has something to do with Africa. Scientists warn Africa is splitting in two. 2,000-mile crack that appeared along southeast of the continent is widening by 1 inch every year. A massive crack ripping through Africa is set to split the continent in two and form Earth's sixth ocean, scientists have warned. Countries along the southeastern coast would become a giant island, creating an entirely new sea from Ethiopia to Mozambique. The so-called Eastern African Rift formed at least 22 million years ago but has shown activity over the last few decades. A crack appeared along the deserts of Ethiopia in 2005 and is widening at a rate of 1 inch per year. It is a result of two tectonic plates moving away from each other, but the exact mechanism was not fully understood at the time. Now, a study published in June found that a massive ejection of superheated rock coming up from our planet's core is driving the rift. Oh. While Africa is not expected to tear for at least another 5 million years, thank God, Somalia and half of Ethiopia, Kenya, and Tanzania will form a new continent when it does. Ken McDonald, a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara, told Daily Mail, "What we do not know is this rifting will continue on its present pace to eventually open up an ocean basin like the Red Sea, and then later to something much larger, like a small version of the Atlantic Ocean. Or might it speed up and get there more quickly? Or it might stall out, as the Atlantic did before it commenced to true seafloor spreading. At the present rate, a sea about the size of the current Red Sea might form in about 20 to 30 million years. A 35-mile crack that appeared in 2005 already showed signs of a new sea near Ethiopia. And another tore through Kenya in 2018 following heavy rainfall, forcing people to leave their homes and shut down roadways. McDonald said he believes EARS, as in an acronym EARS, will cause more cracks in the future. Geologist David Adede told the newspapers, a local outlet, that he believed the fissure was filled with volcanic ash, but that the heavy rains washed the material away and exposed the crack. But locals said it happened abruptly and fast. Some reported feeling the ground shake. Researchers believe EARS is growing larger because two tectonic plates are moving away from each other, the Somali plate in the east and the Nubian plate in the west. Let me tell you something, whoever is watching the video version of this, that's a mighty big crack. All right, yeah, that puts it more in perspective. The movement of the two tectonic plates was observed in 2004 by researchers at Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, who found EARS is moving a few millimeters per year. EARS stretches from the Gulf of Aden to the north to Zimbabwe in the south and is a series of deep valleys, steep escarpments, and volcanic peaks. The geological feature is an ongoing process of continental rifting, where the Earth's crust gradually pulls apart. It's likely formed because of heat flowing up from the asthenosphere, the hotter, weaker upper part of the Earth's mantle, between Kenya and Ethiopia, according to the Geological Society of London. And a new study from Virginia Tech seems to have confirmed that speculation. The team used 3D simulations of the region, finding the rift was being driven by the African superplume, which is responsible for the unusual deformations beneath the system. Continental rifts like EARS are generated primarily as tectonic plates move away from one another, which in turn pulls and stretches Earth's crust. This results in deformations that typically form perpendicular to plate movement. Geophysicist D. Sarah Stamps compared a rifting continent's different deformation styles with playing with silly putty. If you hit silly putty with a hammer, it can actually crack and break, said Stamps, associate professor in the Department of Geoscience, part of the Virginia Tech's College of Sciences. But if you slowly pull it apart, the silly putty stretches, So on different time scales, Earth's lithosphere behaves in different ways. Tahiri Rajanarasan, a postdoctoral researcher at New Mexico Tech who earned his PhD at Virginia Tech, said, "We confirm previous ideas that lithospheric buoyancy forces are driving the rift, but we're bringing new insight that anomalous deformation can happen in East Africa. The recent crack in 2018 is being debated among the scientific community, as some believe it is showing the separation in real time, while others believe such progression is impossible." One resident named Eliud Noroge Magubwa claimed he saw the cracks run through his home. He could only collect some of his belongings before his house collapsed. Damages were seen on a busy road in Mahu Narok, Kenya. Let me tell you something, that's a big crack. You know what? I have to laugh because when you read that this is like progressing at 1 inch per year, it's like, oh my God, this will take forever. And in a way, it does sound, but this is the bigger rift than you would normally see. All right, and one of the things that I think is that they can't make up their mind, the so-called experts, about how fast this is advancing or if it's advancing at all. So, I mean, for all we know, what there's some type of explosion or volcanic activity, even if it's not right there. The next thing you know, the 1 inch per year becomes like a yard. That's something interesting to look at. Very unusual. Very unusual. Something to keep an eye on because sometimes you never know. Some of these things are like, oh, we thought it was only going 1 inch a year. Oops. All right. Next story is out of Eerie News. And this is a true crime. Again, unusual when I came across it. And it's titled, "He Said He Killed Her for Love." There are persons who are never meant to hold positions of trust. And Hans B. Schmidt was one of them. Some are just untrustworthy. Others are deadly. Hans B. Schmidt was born in the Bavarian town of Affensburg, one of 10 children. His mother Gertrude was Catholic and his father Heinrich was Protestant, but it was probably the beatings he received at the hands of his father that shaped the man he would become. He also witnessed domestic violence between his parents, brought about because Heinrich did not want her to practice her faith. Perhaps it was also a deep streak of mental illness that ran in his family. His father made a good living as a railroad official, but wasn't at home much. The demands of bringing up 10 children proved too much for his mother, who went into a depression and coped by attending church twice per day. The only one of her children who shared her devotion was Hans. The young Hans developed religious obsession, but sexual promiscuity with males and females as well. If this was not troubling enough, he was fascinated with drinking blood and dismemberment. His relatives described where he beheaded 2 geese kept by his parents and kept the heads in his pocket. Like a moth to the flame, he spent hours at the village slaughterhouse on a daily basis, where he watched animals being killed and chopped up while he ate pieces of fruit. The slaughterhouse seemed not to sate Hans. Chickens, rabbits, and squirrels were found horribly mutilated on the farm property. If it wasn't for the heinous act that landed him in prison later in life, none of his history would be known. But like many who prey on other human beings, their history is replete with warnings of the scourge they will be to those around them. Sworn depositions from the Schmidt family filled in the blanks of his past. His older sister, Elizabeth Schmidt Schadler, described his fascination with blood at a young age, as well as sexual attraction to her. Heinrich's paternal grandfather was institutionalized due to alcoholism. One of his brothers, Jacob Schmidt, was committed to an institution for his entire life and died there. Gertrude's grandfather, this is Gertrude the mom, Andreas Seppler, hung himself in 1849. In the aftermath of the suicide, Gertrude's brother, Conrad, shot himself. However, he had a history of cutting himself before the final act. Hans Schmidt himself never tired of producing hundreds of pages detailing all his lurid experiences. In 1905, he was 24 years old and was already a seminary student. When he was 19 years old, he was admitted to the St. Augustine Seminary at Mainz in preparation for the priesthood. However, it seemed his religious training had not rubbed off sufficiently because he was arrested by Bavarian police for forging diplomas for failing students. Ironically, it was his father who hired a good attorney, which saved him from going to jail. The lawyer argued the charges should be dropped for reasons of mental defect. This was despite the fact the prosecutor of Mainz was intent on sending him to prison. Instead, he was sent to the cold water sanitarium at Jordanbad and Württemberg. He was there for a month and only took one bath. He was then sent to Ingelsberg Monastery at Miltenberg to do penance. Soon the monks, tired of dealing with him and his refusal to follow any instructions, they sent him back post-haste to the seminary at Mainz. In 1905, he followed the highly publicized murder case of Harry Thaw and was sympathetic towards the killer and thought he was being persecuted. Perhaps Thaw was right in killing Stanford White, he surmised. It was apparent there was something wrong with Hans Schmidt, both morally and mentally, or perhaps in present-day vernacular, he was a psychopath. He said that he was ordained by Bishop George Kirstein on December 23, 1904. However, conversations he had later in life with alienists, as psychiatrists of the day were called, seemed to reflect that an ordination with a vision he had of St. Elizabeth was the one that counted. He described it this way, quote, "The bishop ordained me alone. I do not like to speak of it. The real ordination took place the night before St. Elizabeth. She ordained me herself. I was praying at my bedside when she appeared to me and said, 'I ordain you to the priesthood.' There was light during her appearance. I told no one. I thought it best to keep it to myself. They would make fun of me. They always make fun of me for these things. They always expect others to do it as they do. God speaks to different people in different ways." End quote. He never explained why the bishop would ordain him alone, but most probably it was because many in the seminary thought he was not priest material. He was assigned to the villages of Burgel and Seelingstadt, where he caught a wide swath of immoral acts with those who lived there. He molested altar boys, kept company with prostitutes, and had sexual liaisons with women. Schmidt gave sermons that were so strange that not only did the other priests complain about him, but parishioners as well. The priest and Monsignor were in a quandary. They couldn't keep him there, but no other parish would accept him. Whether by his own decision or the diocese in Mainz, by 1909, Schmidt, then 28, was sent to the United States and assigned to St. John's Catholic Church in Louisville, Kentucky. Trouble soon brewed between him and the senior pastor, and he was sent to St. Boniface Church in New York City. Later rumors surfaced that Schmidt had been defrocked and banished in Germany. He had gone to America presenting his ordination papers to the church's superior first in Louisville, then Trenton, New Jersey, and finally New York City, without mentioning that he was no longer a priest. 3 years passed, and it was in the rectory of the St. Boniface Church that he crossed paths with Anna Almüller, the housekeeper. She had immigrated from the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1910 when she was 18 years old. Like his later disclosure about his ordination, he told alienists that he heard a voice which he believed to be God telling him to love Anna. She resisted the advances of a man who was 10 years older than her, but eventually she became his mistress. In a pattern followed by his superiors at his prior post, who did not know how to handle the strange reverend, he was reassigned to St. Joseph's Church in Harlem. He continued in the secret relationship with Anna and a homosexual affair with Ernst Murit, with whom he was running a counterfeiting operation. Anna was fired from St. Boniface after it was suspected she was pregnant, and by none other than Father Schmidt. Perhaps to quiet Anna, who faced ostracization not only by the church but by the community, he performed a marriage between them, including filling out a marriage certificate. He told her he was leaving the church for her. Schmidt would go on to desecrate the high altar at St. Joseph Church by having sex with Anna on it. He said that God repeatedly told him to sacrifice her, but apparently he told Anna about his impulses and she called him crazy. But she was bound to him more than ever since she was pregnant. They went on to rent an apartment even though he continued in his double life. On the night of September 2nd, 1913, he cut her throat with a 12-inch butcher knife while she slept, drank her blood, and raped her as she died under him. Later he dismembered her body using a hacksaw and a knife. First was her head, and then he cut her in half, wrapping each section in a newspaper dated August 31st. The lower part was in a pillowcase monogrammed with an A on it. He threw gray-green schist inside the pillowcases to weight it down. He boarded the Fort Lee ferry 7 times and threw the pieces into the Hudson River. For Schmidt, it was business as usual. He returned to the church, performed Mass, and gave Holy Communion to the parishioners. It seems the rocks didn't weigh the body down enough, and on September 5th, 2 children found the upper torso of a woman at Cliffside Park. 3 miles away in Weehawken, New Jersey, the rest of her came ashore, minus the head though. Eventually, other grisly finds were made. The autopsy estimated the woman was in her 20s, was about 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed about 125 pounds. It revealed she had given premature birth just before she was killed. Eventually, the coroner would sew together 6 pieces of a body that had once been Anna Almuller. Her head was never found. The first clue Hudson County Police found was a price tag attached to a pillowcase wrapped around the body part. It was traced to a factory in Newark, which sold only to George Sachs, a furniture dealer in Manhattan. The New York City Police Department took the case and assigned Detective Joseph Farrow. Farrow visited George Sachs at 2782 8th Avenue, but the furniture dealer couldn't remember how many pillowcases he sold. A check was made of his receipts, and there was a sale of a bedspring, mattress, pillow, and pillowcases on August 26, 1916. The buyer was A. Van Dyke, and the items were delivered to 68 Bradhurst Avenue to a third-floor apartment. The building superintendent told them a married couple had rented the apartment 2 weeks before. He described the man as speaking with a thick German accent, and his name was H. Schmidt. The police watched the building, but no one came to the apartment. Eventually, the police forced the door and examined the interior. They found the floor was scrubbed, but there was dried blood splatters on the walls. Inside a trunk, they found the saw and the knife. There was also handkerchiefs with an embroidered A, like the pillowcases. They found clothing with the label of A. Van Dyke sewn into the lining. There were letters in both German and English addressed to Hans Schmidt. Many of the letters originated from women in Germany. However, most of them were from Anna Almuller, with an address of 428 East 70th Street. Inspector Farrow and Detectives Casassa and O'Connell went to the address and found that Anna had moved after being hired as a housekeeper at St. Boniface's Church. This was their next stop, and the senior pastor, Father John Brown, said Anna had been his housekeeper, but had transferred to St. Joseph's Church. They asked him if he knew Hans Schmidt. Father Brown said he was a priest who had once served there, but had been transferred to St. Joseph's Church as well. The police finally found their man. It was after midnight when Father Daniel Quinn took them to Schmidt's room. The priest quickly admitted, I killed her because I loved her." He went on to describe how he murdered her and what he did with the body. Father Quinn listened in horror. Once arrested, the Archdiocese of New York suspended him. Considering he had confessed, his defense team argued that he was insane and presented his bisexuality and hearing voices to prove their claim. Dr. Smith Eli Jalliffe, a psychologist, testified that Schmidt should be spared the death penalty since he had up to 60 relatives who displayed signs of mental instability. Dr. Jalliffe said, quote, "On one occasion, he had taken the head of a rooster and put it, while still bleeding, on the ends of his penis, and had walked around strutting about with his decapitated head of this rooster on his penis until his father caught him and beat him." End quote. Hans started a sexual relationship with a neighborhood boy. This is back in Germany. Hans started a sexual relationship with a neighborhood boy named Fritz when he was 10 years old. They continued having sex for years. They both went to the slaughterhouse and would become sexually aroused with the sight of blood. During that period, Hans also began to have sexual relations with his older brother, Carl. Other alienists who interviewed Schmidt before his first trial testified for the prosecution that despite Schmidt's story about hearing voices telling him to sacrifice Anna, he was completely sane. On September 16, 1913, Dr. Ernst Murray was arrested for his part in the counterfeiting scheme. The apartment where they ran the operation had been rented using the name of George Miller, which was an alias used by Muret. The pair had told renting agents they were medical students that were going to use the flat for experiments. Authorities found plates for $20 yellowbacks, which seemed to have been made by an expert engraver. They also found $10 false bills. Murray told police he was born in Chicago and received his dental certificate in 1911. He said he had studied abroad for 14 years and had been a student at the Berlin Dental College, but had not passed his examination and didn't receive a diploma. He returned to New York in 1903 and served as an assistant to other dentists before opening his own office 2 years before. Murray was convicted in October 1913 of counterfeiting charges and sent to the federal prison at Atlanta to serve a 7-year sentence. It turned out also he was never a dentist, but he was not prosecuted for this. In December 1913, the trial ended in a hung jury of 10-2. Two of the jurors seemed to be swayed by the argument that Schmidt had killed Anna because he was insane. 2 weeks later, the second trial began, and the prosecution brought in a new witness. Her name was Bertha Zeck, a fellow German immigrant who said that in April of 1913, before Schmidt supposedly heard the voices, she posed as Anna Almüller and purchased a $5,000 life insurance, naming Father Schmidt as the sole beneficiary. Bertha worked for Murray as a maid at his office. It came to light that Schmidt and his lover planned a series of murders and insurance fraud and had blank death certificates ready to be falsified. On February 5, 1914, it took the jury only 3 hours of deliberation to find Schmidt guilty of first-degree murder. After being sentenced to death, he said, quote, "I'm satisfied with the verdict. I would rather die today than tomorrow." End quote. He was sent to Sing Sing prison. While he was in the Tombs awaiting execution, Schmidt declared that he was planning to do away with the hopelessly insane, the permanently crippled, and those suffering from incurable diseases by poison or by the knife. As was expected, Schmidt's attorney filed an appeal and stayed his execution for 1 year. In December 1914, Schmidt confessed to feigning insanity, but said Ernest Murray, his homosexual lover, had accidentally killed Anna during a botched abortion. His love for Murray had made him take the blame for the crime. The ploy didn't work, and Schmidt went to the electric chair on February 18, 1916. His last words were, "I want to say one word before I go. I beg forgiveness of all I have offended or scandalized, and I forgive all who have offended against me." Then before the switch was thrown and he had the hood over his face, he said, "My last word is to say goodbye to my dear old mother." Newspapers had been avidly following the story. A reporter with the Albany Times wrote, quote, "His last night on earth he spent proclaiming his innocence and declaring that he had made peace with God. The guard had expected a scene when the slayer was to be executed, but his action surprised them. He was the coolest man in the death chamber. He almost domineered those who assisted in putting him to death." End quote. Schmidt was interred by Father William Cashin in Sing Sing Cemetery, since his body couldn't be sent back to Germany because of World War I. The Schmidt family asked his burial location to be kept secret. Even though other crimes were never proven against him, he was a suspect in several cold cases. He kept company with a woman named Helen Green, who left to Chicago a month before Anna was murdered. Helen Green was never found in New York or Chicago. It's thought he did away with her. There was another woman Schmidt was seen with soon after his arrival in America that he said was his wife. She also disappeared. Schmidt's attorney recalled a conversation with his client where he said, quote, he admitted that he had taken a small boy to an apartment at 124 West 84th Street, but denied that it was his son. He said he wouldn't tell who the boy was because he didn't want to drag his family in. As for the girl, Helen Green, for whom the police were looking for, Schmidt said that he had met her casually and described her as a girl of the streets. This coincided with a story told by another person, which led authorities to believe it wasn't only women he killed. The owner of the apartment building where he lived said that she saw him sometimes bringing a 5-year-old boy to his room. He said the boy was his son, but one day he disappeared. When the landlady asked him the name of the boy, he said it was August Van Dyke. Police had found a letter from Helen Green, who wrote Schmidt that she could not live without him. It was believed she was in Chicago, but after her disappearance a month before, no trace of her could be found. She had met Schmidt the winter of 1912. Once Smith's photograph was publicized, many recognized him as the man frequently seen along the Great White Way, which was Broadway, enjoying the nightlife. He represented himself as the Count and the son of noble persons. Schmidt was also a suspect in the murder of Alma Kellner, age 9, whose body was found buried in the basement of St. John's Church in Louisville. On December 8, 1909, she left her home at 507 East Broadway in Louisville to attend Mass at St. John's Church. She was wearing a brown plaid dress with cream velvet trim and collar. Over this she wore a dark brown coat and a red hat. It was the Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary and solemn Mass was planned. This was 6 blocks from her home. She failed to return, and by the afternoon her family notified police. The force scoured the city looking for her, and hospitals were contacted to see if a child fitting her description had come into their care. As the hours passed and no clue was found, authorities theorized she might have been kidnapped since her family was well off. The weeks turned into months and no ransom note was received by the family. On May 26, 1910, the custodians of St. Joseph's School found the basement was flooded almost 4 feet due to a broken pipe. 4 days later, a plumber found that a bad stench pervaded the basement once the water level had dropped to 1 foot. As he started to clear out the debris with a shovel, he struck something just under the water. From the light of a lantern, he saw a small foot and shoe sticking out from the rubbish. 10 minutes later, the police arrived and soon confirmation was made that Alma Kellner had been found. Her body was wrapped in a carpet. When the coroner touched the carpet, flesh fell from the bone. The right foot was missing from below the knee and both hands were gone. Most of what was left was skeletal. Her skull was fractured in several places and pieces of the cranium had broken off. Some of the bones were charred. Father Schumann, the pastor of the church, did not know the cellar even existed until the problem arose with the broken pipe. The police theorized that whoever brought her there knew of the place beforehand, since its existence was not common knowledge. Inside a closet, police found a remnant of a carpet that matched the one she was wrapped in. This was the closet used by the janitor. They also found a bloodstained man's shirt inside. The school janitor, Joseph Wendling, had been questioned when the girl originally disappeared in December and walked off the job the following month. His wife, Lena Wendling, still lived on the school grounds in the janitor's apartment. She told police he had a history of leaving his job without any reason. Wendling had been hired at the church in November 1909, and he had keys to all the buildings on the property. Wendling went from state to state until a detective from Louisville caught up with him in California. This was 3 months after the discovery of Alma's body. He kept insisting he had not killed the little girl. By December, he was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Alma's uncle requested that Wendling should be pardoned and deported to France, his country of origin, in 1935. He served 26 years in prison for the crime and claimed he was innocent until the day of his death. When Schmidt was asked about the Kellner girl, who was killed during the time he was posted at St. Louisville, he said he had never heard of her. This was strange since the crime had made front-page news and she was a student at the Catholic school he visited in 1909. Considering the child's body was found only a few feet away from the altar, the diocese cooperated with the authorities, so it would be difficult to believe he was not familiar with the girl. German police traced evidence of a murdered girl in Schmidt's hometown of Offensburg back to him. The Germans never had a chance to question Schmidt before he was executed in the United States, and the case went cold. Farrow gave a chilling description of Schmidt for a New Zealand newspaper in 1913. Quote, "He has been characterized by some as an archdemon. I should prefer to designate him a monster, for most certainly he is the most monstrous creature that ever confronted me in my long connection with the police." End quote. Interesting story, and obviously a very disturbed kid, very disturbed. And it makes you feel like, who dropped the ball? His family? The seminary where he was at that actually made him a priest? If that's, who dropped the ball? And, but remember also at the same time, everybody just wanted to hand him off. Like, which is what happens with a lot of these people, these psychopathic, weird disturbing people. The family thought, oh, great, he's in the seminary. And the seminary soon were like, whether he got defrocked or not, oh, he's off to the United States. Bye. We'll pay you to get out of here. And and in the end, he was he was killing people. And who knows who else he might have done away with. In the meantime, let's go on to the next story. This is out of Psychology Today. And I thought this was interesting because back in 2007, as a matter of fact, in July of 2007, right? Hard to, hard to believe that it's almost soon going to be 20 years. What is it, 16 years? That movie, The Secret, came out, which was about the law of attraction. And, it made the rounds, and I never forgot it because, some people thought, oh, this is great, and other people were like, oh, that's, they put it down. But anyway, this article is titled "A Psychological Approach to the Law of Attraction: How Focusing on Your Goal Increases Your Ability to Achieve It." This is obviously this is written by somebody that does psychology. Many of my clients are very interested in the concept of manifesting what they want by utilizing something known as the law of attraction. The basic premise of the law of attraction is that we attract into our lives whatever we focus our full attention on. It proposes that positive thoughts attract positive things to you and negative thoughts attract negative things. Most of what is written about the law of attraction makes it sound like magic. However, much of its effectiveness can be explained by some basic Gestalt psychology principles that date back to the early 20th century and are solidly based on the science of how our brain works. What is Gestalt psychology? Gestalt psychology is a school of psychology founded in Germany in the early 20th century by Max Horkheimer, Kurt Kafka, and Wolfgang Kohler. Gestalt psychology studies the principles behind human perception. It developed theories about the laws governing how the human brain perceives separate bits of data as meaningful wholes. An example of this would be when we are listening to music. We hear and respond to a melody as a whole, not just as a series of individual notes. Some of you may be familiar with the basic Gestalt psychology thesis. The whole is greater or different than the sum of its parts. One way to think about the law of attraction is in terms of the Gestalt psychological perceptual concept of figure ground formation. At any point in time, there is more possible data to attend to than our brain and senses can process. Our brain prioritizes certain information and ignores other types to keep us from being flooded by too much information. What we prioritize becomes the bright, shiny, interesting figure that stands out. Other things get relegated to the now unseen background. What do humans prioritize? In the simplest terms, humans prioritize what interests them at the moment. This usually fits into three basic categories. 1, what we want. 2, what we fear. 3, our current pressing biological needs such as food when we are hungry. How does this relate to the law of attraction? The law of attraction encourages people to visualize and pay attention to what they really want. Once we start doing this, what we hope to attract and everything associated with it becomes part of category 1, what we want. Now we are suddenly noticing things that we might have previously ignored. If we follow up by taking appropriate steps to pursue the object of our desire, we increase our chances of getting it. You can think of this as a process. 1, visualize what you want in great detail every day. 2, imagine that you already have what you want. 3, make a vision board where you attach pictures and objects that relate to what you are trying to attract. 4, set up an altar of objects related to what you want. As you can see, by doing the above, we increase the likelihood that we will notice opportunities to get what we are visualizing because we have prioritized dramatically. Is this all there is to the law of attraction? I do not think so. I'm very good at manifesting what I want myself. I know that we can have an effect on the world around us in ways that are not yet fully explainable by science. There are still mysteries. I suspect that we will discover the rest of the underlying scientific principles at a future date. However, a lot of how the law of attraction works can now be explained logically and accurately in terms most people can understand. And unlike what people think, manifesting also requires hard work and preparation. For example, I can manifest opportunities to write or teach, but I still have to know how to do both well to take advantage of these opportunities. There is no free lunch. If I want to be a competent guitar player, I can visualize all day and every day, but I will not achieve anything until I pick up a guitar and learn to play it. In summary, a famous occultist and writer on magic, Lon Milo Duquette, is reported to have said, most of what people call magic in the past can be described today as applied psychology. And there we go. That's very interesting. It's very interesting as far as the mindset. You know, your intent, your mindset is very, very important. Now let's go back to Eerie News, and this is another story, and this has to do more with a mystery and ancient history, and it's titled "The Fate of the Legio 9 Hispana." In June of 2023, it was announced that a silver military medal with a Medusa motif was found in what was once the northern edge of the Roman Empire in Britain. Could it have belonged to an ill-fated member of the Ninth Legion? The snake-covered medal dates back approximately 1800 years. It was unearthed on June 6, 2023 at the archaeological site Vindolanda. This was the site of a Roman auxiliary fort built about 100 AD, about 20 years before the construction of Hadrian's Wall. The falera, or military decoration, was found under a barrack floor. The motif is Medusa, which is mostly known in the Greek story where Perseus beheads her while she sleeps by using Athena's shield as a mirror. The Medusa, also known as Gorga, was one of 3 Gorgons. They were described as winged human females with snakes growing from their head instead of hair, and looking into their eyes would turn a person into stone. However, by Roman times, Medusa's image was used to repel evil and to stop bad things from happening to the wearer. The snake-haired image has been found on Roman-era tombs, villas, and battle armor. Alexander the Great was pictured in a 1st century mosaic with a Medusa on his breastplate. The falerae were awarded for valor in battle, and they would be worn with a strap. Most medals are found inside burials. Around the time the wearer of this falera lost his medal, the Legio 9 Hispana, or the 9th Spanish Legion, had already fought in Britain and various provinces throughout the Roman Empire. It was one of the oldest and most feared units in the Roman army. The 9th Legion fought in the siege of Asculum in 90 BC. In 65 BC, Pompey raised them to march and campaign from Gaul to Africa, Sicily to Spain, and Germania Inferior to Britannia. Upon becoming governor of Cisalpine Gaul in 58 BC, Julius Caesar had 4 legions that were already based there. They were the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th. Caesar disbanded them after his final victory and settled the veterans in Pisernum, which is Abruzzo, Italy. After Caesar's murder, there was an attempt to recreate the 7th, 8th, and 9th Legion, but it wasn't until Octavian took power that he recalled the veterans of the 9th to fight in the Balkans, where they received the title Macedonica. They battled against Sextus Pompeius in Sicily in 35 BC, and Octavian then used them in other battles, including the Battle of Actium against Mark Antony in 31 BC. In Hispania, Tarraconensis, which is Spain, they battled the Cantabrians, which is from 25 to 19 BC, and this is when the name Hispana was attached to the legion. In 43 AD, they most likely participated in the invasion of Britain. In 61 AD, they suffered a defeat in the rebellion of Boudica. Most of the foot soldiers were killed and only the cavalry escaped. In 71 AD, they battled the Brigantines and constructed a fortress at Eboracum, which is York. 10 years later, they were under the command of Agricola for the invasion of Caledonia, which is Scotland. The last activity for the 9th in Britain was found recorded in a stone tablet discovered in 1864 when they were rebuilding the legionary fortress at York. The legion mysteriously disappeared from Roman records after 120 AD, without explanation of what happened to them. The fate of the men has been well researched, but without a definitive conclusion of what befell the legion. It was theorized they were defeated to the man around 108 AD in northern Britain. However, there were other mentions made of the 9th Hispana at Nijmegen, which is Netherlands, around 120 AD. There's even a possibility they were destroyed sometime in 200 AD. The only certain fact is that the ninth Hispana did not exist during the reign of the Emperor Septimus Severus, which was from 193 to 211 AD. At this time, there were 33 legions, and two different lists of legions do not have them recorded. In the 1990s, a silver-plated falera with Leg His Ninth, which stands for the Legionnaires Hispanic of the Ninth, was found at a fortress on the lower Rhine River dating to 104 to 120 AD. An altar to Apollo from the same time period was found at Aachen, Germany, which makes reference to Lucius Latinus Macer as chief centurion and prefect of the camp of the ninth Hispana. He had built the altar in fulfillment of a vow. What is not clear is whether the entire legion or only a detachment was at the Netherlands. Scholars believe that the presence of a senior officer like Macer indicated the whole legion was there. With uncertain information available, the traditional theory was that the ninth met their fate on the frontier against the Celtic tribes. Possibly a revolt of the Brigantes soon after 108 was the battle that decimated the legion. One factor that goes against this theory is that two senior officers who were deputy commanders of the ninth circa 120 lived on for many years afterwards. In 1866, a Roman bronze casting of an eagle dated to the 1st or 2nd century AD was found in Salchester, Hampshire, England, during an excavation of a Roman basilica. It was hollowed inside, measured 6 inches in height, but was damaged and the wings were missing. The feet were curved, and it's theorized it was grasping a globe held by a statue of Jupiter. Rosemary Sutcliffe, author of The Eagle of the Ninth, published in 1954, created her story based on the disappearance of the Ninth Legion and the discovery of the Silchester Eagle. The movie The Eagle in 2011 was based on her novel. The demise of the Legion, which numbered 5,000 of Rome's finest soldiers, is argued to have happened either in northern Britain or in the east of the Roman Empire. There are several wars that could account for the end of the Ninth Legion. In 132, the Romans fought the Second Jewish Revolt in Judea, and some believe this is when the Ninth ceased to exist. Perhaps it wasn't destruction, but an act of attrition, which ended the Ninth. Veterans aged out beyond the time they could be recalled, or maybe the answer is much more mysterious than originally suspected. In 1963, a construction engineer found a small hoard of coins while excavating the north bank of the Ohio River during construction of the Sherman-Minton Bridge for Interstate Highway 64 at the Falls of the Ohio. These were Roman coins. They were grouped as though they had originally been in a leather pouch that has long since disintegrated. As author David Brody explained in his book Romerica, published in 2020, quote, "Scores of Roman-era coins, artifacts, and fortifications have been found across New England and the Ohio River Valley. They didn't just swim across the Atlantic on their own, of course. Most of them seem to date back to the 2nd century AD, around the same time that the Roman Ninth Legion, originally stationed in Great Britain, disappeared from history after deploying to Jerusalem to put down the Bar Kokhba uprising. Did members of the Roman Ninth Legion journey to America in the 2nd century? If so, is it possible they brought with them some of the lost temple treasures?" So there we go. Different theories. They were around and then, poof, they're gone. And from what I understand, they were like an elite fighting force. And of course, so long ago, again, they have one theory, but nobody's ever come with definitive proof as to exactly what happened to them. Now, the next article is out of Paranormality magazine. It's titled 36 Children Hospitalized After Playing with Ouija Board at School. This is an incident that unfolded at San Francisco de Asís School in Timbiqui, Colombia. As dozens of children playing with a Ouija board experienced alarming symptoms and were subsequently rushed to a local hospital. Teachers and family members promptly provided assistance to the 36 children who exhibited distressing signs such as fainting, temporary loss of sight, and anxiety. In an attempt to address the situation, the school's rector, Emilia Balanta, resorted to sprinkling holy water over the group while uttering a prayer. However, the exact cause behind the unsettling episode remains shrouded in mystery, leaving the community searching for answers. Balanta expressed his bewilderment, stating that the incident was an unusual and seemingly diabolical occurrence. Some theories circulating among the community attribute the incident to the use of the Ouija board, while others suggest an online challenge found on the internet. Nevertheless, no definitive explanation has been confirmed thus far. Thankfully, the majority of the affected children have shown signs of recovery since the incident, with their condition reportedly improving by approximately 90%. While some residual symptoms persist for a few individuals, they are not deemed serious. Authorities have launched an investigation into the incident to shed light on the underlying causes and prevent similar occurrences in the future. Amarildo Correa, the Education Secretary for Cauca Department, has called for increased vigilance among parents and teachers to ensure the well-being of children. He emphasized the importance of remaining attentive to prevent such incidents from recurring. This distressing event echoes a previous incident in Colombia, where 28 schoolgirls were hospitalized after using a Ouija board and subsequently losing consciousness. The affected students were accompanied by school staff to receive medical attention. Concerns were raised about the possible consequences of engaging in activities that could potentially open doors to unsettling experiences. Parents voiced their worries, urging authorities to investigate the situations at schools more thoroughly and ensure the safety of their children. Chris DeFlorio, a retired police officer who now works as an exorcist, offered a unique perspective on the matter, suggesting that playing with Ouija board might have inadvertently opened a doorway to evil. DeFlorio, who performs exorcism across the United States with his wife, Harmony, explained that there have been multiple documented cases of incidents involving teenagers and Ouija boards in Colombia. He cited an instance where a teenage girl began speaking in a strange language and struck her brother with a stick. While the exact nature of these incidents remains unclear, it is evident that the use of Ouija boards by teenagers has raised concerns and prompted authorities, parents, and the educators to remain vigilant. As investigations continue, it is hoped that a clearer understanding of these occurrences will emerge, allowing for the implementation of measures to prevent similar incidents and ensure the safety and well-being of children in educational settings. A peculiar incident unfolded at San Francisco de Asís. Now, this, you know, this is very unusual because of, more than anything, because of the large amount of children. You hear about some, kids playing with Ouija boards and, stuff like that. When you have a bunch of kids, and it's like, what were they doing? Did they all steal off to a classroom and, this is a very unusual thing. So I thought I wanted to include it. But anyway, I hope you like this little trip into Eerie News. And I will be back with you soon for some more interesting stories. Until then, take care.